Chapter 33, Human Angel. During my darkest moments, when the burden seemed too heavy to bear, a human angel came into my life to help lighten the load. In the latter part of December 1992, as I was exercising, a guard placed a letter on the cell bars. I stopped and read the letter from a black journalist and author, Miss Brbr, then tossed it on the bunk and continued my workout. Usually after reading missives from journalists, authors, and the news media, I tear them up and flush them down the toilet. Throughout the years, I sensed many of them were parasitical opportunists seeking to exploit the Crip legacy and line their pockets. But something urged me to read this letter. Once I finished my workout and took a bird bath, I sat down and perused Barbara's letter again. It was both fate and good timing that induced me to even consider responding. Barbara assured me that her intentions were honorable. She was writing a book about the history of California's black gangs. Because of Raymond Washington's demise, she wrote, I was the sole surviving person who could provide an accurate account of the Crips' growth to become the most notorious black gang in California and to expand its reach across the U.S. and South Africa and elsewhere. Though I didn't detect duplicity on Barbara's part, I still viewed her with suspicion. The following month, January 1993, the first visit with Barbara was secluded in San Quentin's brown panel room where all media interviews were held. I was in chains with handcuffs and sitting in a chair waiting for Barbara to arrive. Two guards were stationed behind me. Seated in the back of the room was the prison's black mouthpiece. A smiling Barbara entered the room, tall, sweet, elegantly dressed, and a beautiful brown complexioned sister. She spoke with polite eloquence, neither cloying nor condescending. I had assumed she would be an uppity black bourgeoise whom I'd browbeat or intellectually spar with to bring her back down to earth. I was a bit nervous and started to sweat profusely, as if I was about to be interrogated, but Barbara's manner set the tone for a pleasant dialogue. Her objective was to spend a single day gathering data about the Crips and me for the book. But this interview encouraged her to schedule another meeting 2 days later. During the second interview, I revealed to Barbara my interest in writing children's books to warn them about drugs, gangs, prison, and crime. Judging by her expression, my literary offer blew her away. The more I explained my intent to deliver a positive message through books, the more the idea made sense to her, though I sensed a slight hesitation on her part to fully commit. Little did she know that my enthusiasm for writing children's books was greater than my zeal had been for cripping. With each exchange in letters on the subject of my writing children's books, the more Barbara got caught up in my literary vision. Still, she had reservations. I wish people could read me better instead of suspecting that I had an angle. Months earlier, while strolling the yard with Holloway, a friend not affiliated with gangs, I told him I wanted to do something positive with my life, to help children stay out of this filthy hellhole and out of gangs. He said, you know, Tookie, I believe you. Besides Evil and Tretch, Holloway was the only other person who was able to feel the truth of my words. Barbara and I began working on the first manuscript. She explained that I had to use the simplest language so that children could comprehend and enjoy reading the book. I discovered that writing the book had a sublime effect on me. It seemed to melt away the years of being desensitized and callous. I felt a sense of genuine purpose to create a book that might tap into the social pathology affecting black children. Though I held no academic degree, I had created my own college curriculum through years of study, extrospection, and hard-knock experiences both on the streets of hell and in San Quentin. Though a role model I could never be, I could act as an African guide or Paul Revere, warning youths about what is coming down the crooked path. Barbara liked how the book was turning out and managed to capture the interest of HarperCollins, a publishing company. Though they were interested, they preferred a book with stories of my past life laced with blood, gore, and ghetto vernacular. They didn't want to hear about the refined Tookie. They wanted the beast, the Tookie of old. I told Barbara I wasn't that desperate. Most other publishing companies considered my proposal to be too controversial, chiefly because I was on death row. Barbara divided her time between looking for a publisher for the children's books, writing her own book, and assisting in the Hands Across Watts project. This was a program designed to promote peace between warring Los Angeles gang factions, initiated by the reformed PJ Crip Commander Tony Bogart and a blood named Ty Stick. Bogart had told Barbara, "Every Crip knows that if you want to know the history of the Crips, contact Tookie on death row." During this same period, I received a letter from Jamel after 14 years of complete silence. With no proper salutations or long time no see, he launched into a propaganda campaign against Hands Across Watts and Jim Brown's American program, and with no explanation. Then he rattled on about Raymond himself and me starting the Crips. Therefore, he and I should stick together. I figured the man was intoxicated, delusional, amnesic, or all three. With his false claim, he was no different from other charlatans who claimed to be co-founders of the Crips. Years later, I would read a book entitled Uprising that was read and ridiculed by every Crip in blood on death row. One of the book's chapters, Godfather Jamel Barnes, was riddled with misinformation, with Jamel's guilty conscience compelling him to defend against a lot of people saying that I, Jamel, didn't pay my dues, or saying that he, Jamel, was a perpetrator. Those are Jamel's words. Although in that chapter there were numerous contradictions, I only addressed one example of misinformation. In the book, pages 152 and 153, Jamel states, "Later, after Raymond passed away, I wanted a twin brother. I wanted somebody to replace Raymond. So I went out and found this guy Tookie and built him up from a little small guy to be a gladiator like me. In fact, I was incarcerated on March 15, 1979, more than 4 months before Raymond's death on August 9, 1979. It was not possible for Jamel to have met me and built me up after Raymond's murder. Second, his misuse of Raymond's name to enhance his credibility and elevating himself by minimizing me and others does not agree with the facts. My memoir should decontaminate the misinformation by Jamel and others. Though I had known Barbara for a short period, I was more inclined to value her judgment about the Hands Across Watts program than the ravings of someone I hadn't heard from in over a decade. Hands Across Watts was receiving positive coverage, particularly within the South Central community and from the press. During a regular prison visit, Barbara asked if I wanted to be part of an upcoming Los Angeles Gang Summit for Peace. This was Barbara's method, I learned later, of determining if I was still cripping and whether I was sincere about promoting peace. How was it possible for me to participate from death row? Barbara said that she could have my speech videotaped and shown on the huge screen before an audience. After I agreed to compose 2 speeches, one for adults and a second one for children, she scheduled the taping the following week to be held in a boardroom at San Quentin. Sometime after I completed the videotape speech, Barbara told me that certain prison staff had assured her I'd never show up to do a videotape that repudiated gangs because I was still the Crip Godfather. They told her, "That man will not even come out of the cell. You're wasting your time and money hiring a production team." When I arrived to meet Barbara for the taping, I found the room was packed with the camera crew, guards, and other prison authorities dressed in suits and wearing shocked expressions. How dare these strangers, who knew me only by my name, reputation, and documentation that was false, try to second-guess my response to a given situation. I was not an institutionalized animal, trained and predictable. Completing these 2 speeches allowed me to cast off a great burden. I could not foretell whether my speech could be taken seriously. I waited anxiously for the results. After a few days, an ecstatic Barbara told me that the moment the screen popped on with an image of me reading my speech, the entire audience became silent and watchful. After the speech ended, there was a standing ovation. In a display of hypocrisy, even Jamel, who had suggested I distrust the nonprofit Hands Across Watts organization, was happily nibbling on the events or as devours. My appellate attorneys during that period had objected to the video being shown, but I overrode their disapproval. They acted as if I was a dirty secret that should remain unseen and unheard by the public. Their opinion didn't faze me. I was determined to get my message across to black youths about the perils of drugs, gangs, crime, violence, and prison life. What mattered most was the contribution I could make toward helping youths in hands across Watts. On January 13, 1994, while in the PJs, not wearing his bulletproof vest, Bogart was shot and killed by another PJ Crip. 1994 would be a year to remember. Barbara had it in her mind that I deserved grade A, and somehow she made sure I got it. Everybody in our yard figured my chances of getting to grade A were slim and none. So for years I refused each scheduled classification committee. Barbara refused to accept the status quo. She was a delicate looking woman, but a tenacious fighter with a fierce drive. She initiated a support campaign that included a number of notable citizens from mainstream society. The warden and associate warden were bombarded with letters and email messages from credible advocates expressing their concerns and their belief in my conversion. Associate Warden Nelson was the chief arbitrator for the classification committee in the whole at that time. It would be difficult to find a prisoner who would disagree that Nelson was deemed the meanest and most unmerciful person on staff. There was no way Nelson would allow me to have grade A, but if by some miraculous intervention it did happen, everybody on the same yard had a shot. The committee was composed of Caucasians, with the exception of a black counselor, Hammond. Word had it, Hammond was mean-spirited, anti-prisoner, and an Uncle Tom, but I delayed my opinion. When I was summoned to Hammond's office for a C-file central file review, he expressed interest in the videotaped speech for the gang summit and the children's book project I was working on. After making copies of documents in my C-file and discussing my children's project, Hammond admitted that I was nothing like what he had heard or read about in my files. I let him know that the prison files are a mere caricature of who I used to be, not who I was today. He caught me off guard when he asked why I thought I deserved to be on grade A. I told him I've committed no rule violations to be in the hole. I'm no longer cripping, and I haven't had a disciplinary write-up in years. I've undergone a personal transformation. Hammond didn't say much, just that he had hoped to see me in classification. I left the office thinking that the man appeared to be upfront with me. That was all I was asking of anybody. When I talked again with Barbara, she said I deserved grade A because the speech I made for the Los Angeles Gang Summit was a public declaration of my repudiation of gang violence, gang membership, and my leadership and participation in gang life. That speech was truly my forever farewell to Crip. I had chosen another path. I felt that my videotaped speech from death row, though unprecedented, would have no effect on the committee. I agreed with Barbara that I would go to the classification, which occurred every 60 days, but I didn't believe a change in grade status was possible. At the committee meeting, Hammond reminded the members that I hadn't any disciplinary write-ups in years, and so he was therefore recommending I receive grade A status. Nelson, the associate warden, vehemently objected, as did the others. One of them said, "The man's the co-founder of the Crips, for Christ's sakes. His influence is too vast. He doesn't deserve a status change." Then another counselor proposed that I should debrief. Hammond explained that debriefing was for prison gang members, not a street gang like the Crips. Another counselor said, well, since Mr. Williams wants grade A, he should have to debrief anyway. Hammond said, I'm confident Mr. Williams would refuse to debrief or to submit to a polygraph test. Then he looked over at me. Through clenched teeth, I said, of course I refuse. I value my life and dignity too much to debrief. I left the room, steaming. Later, both Evo and Tretch told me that committee brought up debriefing to them, which they too rejected. Debriefing is a system used throughout the California Department of Corrections to barter the souls of prison gang members, revolutionists, or any prisoner for information about their gang, its members, their hegemony, and any past and present criminal activities. Crips passing through the hole used to talk about homeboys and other individuals in prison gangs who had debriefed like it was the thing to do. Rumor had it that the only way a man could get out of the hole at Pelican Bay, a maximum security prison in California near the Oregon state border, was by being paroled, debriefing, or in a casket. During a visit, I explained to Brbr what debriefing meant. Offended by their suggestion that I should debrief, she said her next step would be to contact Hammond and find out what could be done. I told her it wasn't enough that I was facing execution. They also wanted to rip my dignity out of my chest. I didn't believe Brbr could get my speech videotaped, but she accomplished it. In time, she convinced me never to doubt her abilities. It was rare for me to trust anyone in society other than my mother, but I found myself trusting this woman. When I didn't even trust my attorneys, I marveled at Bbr's trustworthiness and her dedication to follow through in a pinch. Very few people in society are beating down the gates to go to bat for a death row prisoner. No other person on the face of this planet has offered to help me achieve a positive goal. But in a short time, Brbr earned my respect and trust. Her energy was so infectious, I started thinking, well, perhaps there is a possibility of getting grade A.